series where we dive into people's journeys of overcoming challenge and adversity in their lives so that we can see what is really possible and what it really takes. I'm your host, Jordan Kilpatrick Smith, and joining me this week is Amanda Sloup. Amanda is a triathlete who's placed in Olympic distance triathlons and completed 3 half-ironman races. Amanda, thank you for being here with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. I'm happy to be here.
So where does your journey through all of this start?
Sure. I think I have a pretty unusual journey into triathlon in general. My story starts back in 2014 when I actually got injured running, and my best friend at the time, her boyfriend was the coach of a triathlon team and was helping me through some exercises and introduced me to cycling as a way of physical therapy and swimming as well. So I started kind of working out with a group over at a gym, and a lot of them were doing triathlon, and I went to watch one of the races and I said, you know what? That actually looks like fun, or that could be a good idea. I think my interest is piqued. Yeah.
Nice. So you started off as a runner, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And was that just for fun, or was that like how'd you get into that?
So I started off running because it was easy and accessible. There used to be this beautiful boardwalk where I used to live, and it followed 7 miles down a bay, and it was just beautiful, and I loved to run it. So that's where running became part of my kind of everyday or every other day routine, and followed me until I moved out to California. But if you have been running for a while, running every day is a little bit hard on the body. And so I started experiencing like a lot of knee and hip issues, but yeah, running was always a passion. And then I started doing a lot of half marathons and trying to continue to push myself that way until I pushed myself maybe a little bit too hard and had to take a step back.
Nice. So running was something you did kind of for fun, for passion. Injury happened, introduced into cycling and swimming as a form of rehab.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went and saw your first triathlon. You're like, you know what? This seems like something I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So up to this point, had you done cycling? Had you done swimming in the past, or was this new for you?
Yeah, so when I was a child, I did do swim team up until I was in, I don't know, 8th grade or so. So I was a confident swimmer. I was not a confident bike rider or cyclist. I had actually never been on a real road bike until the day I went on my first 40-mile bike ride.
What?
Yes, exactly. I had ridden a road bike in a studio that was attached to a mount.
Right.
So like the back tire spins and you just get on and it is stationary. So that was my first introduction to a real road bike. I was 25, late in life to learn how to ride a bike. So that was an extremely hard challenge. And I learned how to use the clipless pedals in the parking lot of the grocery store before my first ride.
How did you, what was that? What? Like, a lot of people, they learn to ride a bike and it's like, okay, we're going around the block,
Mm-hmm.
right? What was that like for you to show up in the parking lot and be like, okay, we're going to go 40 miles?
I was terrified a little bit to be honest. I had been doing a lot of indoor training classes on a bike called a CompuTrainer, or it's like a bike stand called a CompuTrainer. And with this group that I had become a part of, and we were training all winter. So it was time to take winter training outside for the first time. So it was the first ride of the season, open warm up, supposed to be easy, rolling hills. And I felt pretty confident about my, about like the power I was pushing out and everything, kind of like that my stats were showing on the screen during my classes. So I felt pretty good about that. The parts I was nervous about was the actual bike handling skills.
Yeah.
Yes, that was very.
How did that go for you?
So I definitely fell over at 2 stop signs. not knowing how to get my feet out fast enough.
Yeah.
That was fun. An interesting challenge for
Yeah.
sure. And, different parts of my body were just very sore that I didn't think were going to be very sore, especially like my back and, just different parts that require movement,
Yeah.
outside rather than, being on a stationary bike. So it was eye-opening for sure, but I fell almost instantly in love with it. So
nice. So there wasn't like the fear didn't overtake you or anything. It was like, okay, this is new, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you know what, this is fun, I enjoy this.
yeah, exactly. And I had a really great group of people kind of encouraging me and pushing me along the way. So it was very helpful to have like 20 other people be alongside me, kind of checking in, seeing how I'm doing, trying to give me tips, along the way. Stopping with me because at first I couldn't take my water bottle out of the cage.
Right.
I was too nervous to move my hands from the handlebars, so I had to stop and like take a drink of water and then like try to catch up to everyone, which was never gonna happen.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So people had a lot of patience with me, and it was great.
And how long ago was that first ride?
That was 2000. That was probably like March of 2014.
Okay, cool. So we're 6.5 years down the road. So okay, so you start cycling, and I imagine that your running rehab went well, and you start training swimming.
Yep.
And then can you tell me a little bit about like what was all that training like? Because you're training for something that you've never done before, right? Which was the triathlon. So can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that my friend who was doing the kind of rehab with me was also running this triathlon team. So he brought me in, and he had a whole team training program designed for a group of, I think we were close to 40 athletes. So it was a large group, big training program, and there were exercises and classes to go to every day. So
every day, like 7 days a week.
Yes. So you could choose your own schedule by kind of like what classes you wanted to attend. But it was really an easy way to be social and keep on track and keep training up. And I made a couple best friends there. So it was, really fun to just hang out and work out together. So that definitely, made the experience, much more enjoyable and also fun and social. And yeah.
So do you think the social side of things had a large impact on the outcome, like into you actually getting there?
Yeah, I would say the social side, but really the encouragement from the two coaches and from the other teammates really pushed me to keep going when I had doubts in myself, for sure.
What were those doubts like? What were some of the things that were popping up for you?
One, I had never really ridden a bike, so how was I going to compete in an event where the bike is the longest segment of the race against people who have been riding a bike their entire life, from a child or childhood until teens, and early adulthood. And I was coming in definitely as the underdog. The bike is a lot of people's strengths and where they can really, put in the effort and it shows. So that was definitely my weakest link going in. And I was not scared I couldn't finish it, but scared I would come in dead last, or, people would be waiting for me all day, or I would just be so slow that I would be annoyed with myself that I would just want to finish. It was like, get it over with.
And how'd you deal with those things? Because those can be pretty daunting.
Yes. So I knew if I stuck to my training and really just committed to, my team and the workout program that was, designed for me, that I had to put my trust in someone else who had done it before, that they knew what they're doing. They're not going to let me fail. They're going to help me get there.
Right.
So it was a lot of blind trust, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so, okay. So you're going through this training. There's naturally all of these self doubts about can I really do this? Is this,
Mm-hmm.
or am I just in over my head? Putting
Mm-hmm.
faith in the people that are there to support you, that are there encouraging you. And so you show up. When was your first race?
It was May of that year, May of 2014.
So you started in March.
Mm-hmm. And I completed my first race the first weekend of May in 2014. It was a race called Wildflower.
Okay, that seems like a very short timeline.
It was. Yes, it was. I was definitely thought I was in over my head, and I jumped into things way too soon when I showed up at, race day, and they're handing me all my race bibs, all my numbers, and telling me how to, put the numbers on my bike. I thought I didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
I was like, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to be a bystander. I'll just watch. This is fun.
Yeah.
Yep. It was a little bit it was definitely overwhelming.
And how did you like refocus yourself when you're in this state of overwhelm right before a big race? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
did you manage that?
My default is to go into very like task automated work. So doing things that I know I'm like very comfortable with, and things just like keep my mind occupied. So things like setting out all my gear bags. So just like recounting my clothes, making sure I have my socks, laying out my shoes, getting all of my nutrition together, being very particular about how all my nutrition is attached to my bike, making sure my bottles are filled with electrolytes, just going through kind of step by step and keeping my brain occupied, still focused on the task, but occupied in a different manner, just to get that feeling of self-doubt down a
Yeah.
little bit.
So you focused on the things that were within your control, not the
Mm-hmm.
things that were without your control, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Um, can you tell me a little bit about the nutrition behind a triathlon? Because I've never done a triathlon, right? But I imagine you don't want to just do the whole thing fasted and not have electrolytes. And so can you tell me a little bit about what that's like?
Ooh, yes. So nutrition, I think, is also very particular to the individual and what your body is able to metabolize when you're doing endurance sports. So I think it's a little bit different for everyone, and just finding a good routine that works for you. For me, in the mornings, I would do a like a peanut butter or an almond butter, um, bread and banana sandwich,
Nice.
and that would be my morning breakfast. And then because you don't want to go into the water and you don't want to start your swim super heavy,
Mm,
you'll not drown, but you don't feel very comfortable if you eat a huge meal and then go decide to do a huge sporting event. So
right.
really, I think the most important thing about nutrition during triathlon is making sure you have sustained energy. So that means probably having uh, depending on your body size. For me, it's like 150 calories every 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on temperature, how hard I'm pushing, uh, different kind of factors like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say you probably don't want to go over like an hour and a half without having something to
Yeah.
like constantly feed yourself.
So I'm like a little bit of a physiology nerd. And so
Great.
I really enjoy this kind of stuff. And if you can't answer this question, then that's okay. But
Mhm.
what I'm hearing you say is that for you, for your body, what works for you is to have a light carb heavy, a carb where the carbs are the largest part of it. I don't want to say heavy in the implication that, it's a heavy meal,
Mhm.
but lots of carbs, fuel up the glycogen stores. You set out on your race, and then every 45 minutes or so, you're restocking. And when you're doing that resupply of
Mhm.
150-ish calories, what do you take in that time?
Yeah, so it has changed over the years as I've also learned more about nutrition and feeding my body and fueling my body correctly and what feels good for me. In the beginning, I was very much just about quick, easy calories, what didn't require any attention for me to like sustain and also what could I swallow?
Mm-hmm.
What could my body physically digest? And in the beginning, it was really hard. Um, I could basically only keep down, do you know those like Cliff Gel shots? They're
Mm-hmm.
like sugar in a bag.
Yeah.
They're disgusting. Or they're called goos, they're
Yeah.
just like gel in a little pouch.
Yeah.
So I take one of those, or the Cliff shot blocks. They're like the little squares, they're like little squares of sugar. It's almost like
Okay.
candy,
Okay.
but they have electrolytes and other kind of endurance food.
Yeah.
If you've seen the goos, they're sold in like this exact same aisle. They're
Okay.
kind of the same thing, just in a different gooey format.
Yeah.
Uh, so those were the things I could eat easily when I was on the bike or during my run. During my run, I could only get down the gels, like soft and liquid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as I started doing more triathlons and learning more about nutrition and the endurance aspect, that definitely changed. So I started eating some products by this brand called UCAN, which is basically like a long-lasting carbohydrate products. So they had these bars, and I would actually just like cut them up the night before into little squares, and I would put them in my little food box on
Nice.
top of my bike. So they would just be little squares like this big or so that I
Like an
could,
inch or so.
yeah, exactly. So that I could eat them easily. I wouldn't have to like open any wrappers and break them apart and figure out all of that. So I just ended up chopping them up, and I would just eat them. So
Mm-hmm.
that actually became a better source of sustained long-term carbohydrate than the extreme spikes of sugar rush.
Yeah.
So I mixed those in, and I started relying more on those products than on the sugary gel products, which I think definitely helped my performance.
Yeah. I would imagine so, right? Because if you're just spiking up the sugar, your body's going to be like, what? What's going on here? Um,
Yep.
you start to get insulin release, and yeah. So I think having that long-term carbohydrate release definitely would make more sense. Um, Now, when we were looking at, I apologize for anyone listening who doesn't understand physiology. So I'm going to try to explain things nice and simply here. When we start exercise, there's like the 10-second window or so where you let's say you were sprinting down the road, like you're okay, and then you almost hit a wall, and then you start breathing heavier. So you have what's called an anaerobic, where you're not using oxygen. And then as we start to do more and more, you start to use more and more oxygen. Following that pattern, we start with carbohydrates. As you do more and more exercise, you do more towards fat, and you start burning fats. So when you're doing a triathlon and uh, you're going for quite a long time, does anyone or do you work with fat as a main fuel of energy? Like, do people work on getting into ketosis or anything like that?
For me personally, I don't. I find what works for me and my body is fast acting carbohydrates.
Mm.
Really, the biggest shift I noticed was moving away from, the sugar formed energies, and just my ability to actually perform better and just be able to hold pace and hold power for a longer period of time on sustained carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into the fats potentially, I mean, I definitely see the benefit there. I would say that would probably lean more heavily on making your own food
Yeah.
100% of the time than buying some, than buying what they have like in store bought products, which is,
Mm-hmm.
of course, usually the best way to go is, finding out what works for you and making your own.
Yeah.
But at the time, when I was doing it, I wasn't as aware of the nutritional benefits as I am today,
Yeah.
I would say.
Absolutely. Very cool. Just asking because I know I've read studies about people who will enter ketosis either through fasting or like a ketogenic diet, and then stay in ketosis for the entirety of endurance racing, where
Wow.
that way their body is really into and pulling out from the fat stores. And um, I hear about people having incredible mental clarity and just like unlimited energy almost. Does that, now you are much deeper in that world than I am, right? And I've just, read some studies about it. Have you found that people do that, or is that, just academics?
I have not come across that from anyone personally.
Yeah. Okay. So more just people are just theorizing about how this is something that might work.
Possibly. I don't want to say
Cool.
either way because I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So anyways, enough physiology there. Um, okay, tell me about your first race.
Yeah. So my first race was the one I was just telling you about that happened in May of 2014. It was called Wildflower. It is known as the Woodstock of triathlons. It is
Okay.
a super fun race, and how my team got me to try this one as my first. It's like a whole camp out in a lake called Lake Nacimiento, and they shut down all of the roads going in and out, so it's super safe to bike and run, and the entire they keep all the athletes together from Friday evening until Sunday evening to protect everyone. So it's a giant camp out. There's like a beer garden for friends and family. There's music, and it's a really fun event, and it's warm. It's usually pretty warm because it's more like South Central
Yeah.
California. So really fun experience. Leading into the race morning, it's always very cold. As you wake up, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So everyone's down at the race start in pajamas, basically trying
Right.
to keep warm before you strip off all your clothes and jump in the water. This is probably one of the most nerve-wracking points I had ever been in my life. I was sitting at the swim start, and I was like just clutching my best friend's hand, and we were about to, we were waiting for the air horn for our age group to jump in the water. It's one of my most special moments in my head, but I was, yeah, definitely afraid.
Yeah.
I was excited. There's so many, I would say, like hype up things going on. They play music in the morning, and they try to like get everyone in good spirits, and everyone's kind of jumping around and trying to pump everybody else up. So there's a huge amount of energy like in the starting gate. So that really, as soon as I saw that, my mind shift kind of switched, I guess, a little bit from being afraid to being super excited.
Yeah.
But it definitely took me a little bit to get there. But yeah, that
And
was
so
the start.
you the first thing you do is swimming, is that right?
Yep, swim, bike, run.
And how long is that swim?
So for the Olympic distance, it's 0.9 of a mile.
Okay.
It's almost a mile.
Okay. And so you swam a mile. How was that? Early in the morning? Was it cold? What was the water like? What was your experience like there?
Sure. So I always think the water's cold. Um, yeah, but apparently the water wasn't that cold for most people. Some people didn't swim in a wetsuit. There's just no way that I would do that. I don't mind swimming. I like swimming. I think it's a really good warm up, to kind of get your head in the right place. It's quiet under the water, so you can kind of dive in and tune into yourself. And it's early morning, so a little chilly, when your arms come out of the water. But yeah, it was. I like starting off races swimming. It's just a nice way to tune in, get your body moving, get warmed up, and then prepare to go into transition.
All right. So swimming went well, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
You get to the bike. How long is the bike ride?
So for this one, the bike ride was 25 miles.
Okay. So you're doing like a marathon distance on the bike then.
Yes.
How was that?
It was good. So it was my longest transition of any of my races in my entire career. Because getting off the wetsuit and changing clothes, I had never actually done it in a timely fashion or tried to be fast about it. So I think, oh my gosh, I think I spent like 13 minutes in transition, which is a very long time. It's a very, very long time.
What's your time now?
I think I'm down to like 6 or 7 minutes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I might have even been close to 15 minutes. It was very long. But yeah, stomping out of a wetsuit early in the morning, your fingers are cold from being in the water. So trying to clip my bike shoes, get the points and get the thing in and ratchet it. It was very hard. And then the hard part about Wildflower is it is not a flat race. So a lot of other triathlons, they try to make the course really flat so people can compete more on a time level. Wildflower is almost the opposite. It is very hilly, and then the run is a trail run, which is not seen in most races.
Right.
So after stepping out of the water, the first thing you have to do is climb this enormous hill. It's probably like 500 or 600 feet up. It wasn't quite 1,000, but you're going up for a while as soon as you get up, as soon as you get out of the water. So it was daunting. I was like, oh, here we go. Okay. Time to go up. So yeah. But I had a great time. I had a great time on the bike. It was a beautiful course, rolling hills, and the energy from the crowd is just there. So it was awesome.
So is the crowd situated all throughout the course? How does that work?
Yeah, so the crowd is mostly at the transition areas, and they try to make the transition area from the swim and the bike kind of in one area. For Ironman races, it's in actually like just one area. But for other races, it can be in like 2 different areas centered around where the finish line is. So it'll kind of be like off to the side, but so the crowd can just move from like one side of the fence to the other side of the fence.
Right.
To like see whoever they're following.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So yeah, it's set up pretty nicely for spectators.
And what's that? So at the transition areas, you got your friends, your family, they're there supporting you. Mm-hmm. And then you get off on the road and you got 26 miles to go, right? And I imagine that the odds of you being with a friend or a training partner is pretty low. So I imagine you're doing this largely alone, right?
Yep. You're definitely alone. After the swim start, you're on your own. The race is yours. See some team members like in passing, get a little wave, but you're on your own after that.
And what's your mind do throughout that time? What's that like?
Ooh. So the mental game is tough. It's a challenge. For me, just trying to stay fully present and listening to my body is the best way for me to overcome doubt and focus on, I guess, the task at hand, or focus on being a competitor. The second I start to think about the person in front of me, and if they're potentially in my age group. Can I pass them? What would it take for me to pass them? How much energy, do I need? That starts to get my mind in a place that's not centered around me and my performance, that's like externally facing, and that can come back to bite you.
Yeah. And so what happens for you when you kind of get sucked into that pattern of that external focus?
I start to get competitive. I have always had a competitive side. So when I see someone, and also in races, they do write your age for your age group on the back of your calves. So when you're cycling, you can see who's in your age group.
Right.
So that is fun. So you can see who potentially could beat you to the podium. So
yeah,
it is, it's a challenge, but you have to remember to play to your strengths. And for me, I know my strength has always been running. So even though, I might be able to pass some person, on the bike, they might be weaker at running than me. So always kind of play to your strengths.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess. So that's the way I have to control myself to make sure that, I'm sticking to my training plan and what I had set out for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So keeping that focus on you is really important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that that's a common issue within racing where people get distracted, they start focusing on what other people are doing, they start focused on, things outside of themselves just in general, and that causes detriments to their racing abilities, or no?
I have heard about it. But I haven't seen it because usually I've been racing alongside other people who are
Yeah.
experiencing this at the same time.
Right.
But yes, I have had, friends, go out and try to catch other people who are in our age group, and, not think about, really wanting to catch that person in front of them, not thinking about nutrition or not thinking about the rest of their, race plan. And it has come to, I don't say crash and burn, because that's not exactly, but really threw off some of the rest of their plan in terms of like proper nutrition and where they were expecting to use like perceived energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that a skill that you had to develop, or does that just come easily for you?
Definitely a skill I had to develop. I didn't know, or I didn't, it's not something I really thought of before. I'd never been in an environment where I had to choose, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
or, prioritize something like that. So
Yeah. And does that show up in any other areas of your life now that you've developed that skill? Or is that primarily just a racing skill that you've gotten?
yeah, so actually I think it shows up most in my backpacking and the plans that I have set out for doing pretty long distance backpacking hikes. And I say same with like backcountry skiing, kind of putting what is in and outside your control within your mindset, and really making a plan for yourself that is safe and that will get you there, and that is within your training to do
Yeah.
and accomplish.
Nice.
So that's where I think it resurfaces most.
Yeah. Cool. 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 So, how did the running go?
Yeah, on the run, I was so excited to be off the bike. I was elated. I couldn't wait. The run is only a 10K. It's 6 miles, which for me is a super doable distance. And it was the end, and I was just so excited to have completed the bike. And I knew the run was my strong suit, and I just went ham. I just like let everything,
Yeah.
I just let it rip, and it was so much fun. And then the last the last part of the race, you run down that big hill that we had to climb up on the bike, and you run through the finisher's gate, and they announce your name, and the whole crowd's cheering. It's a pretty special moment.
Nice. What was that like? You just completed your first triathlon.
I felt great. I also felt completely exhausted. My mental, I was probably like one of the most, like happy and accomplished feelings I had ever felt in my entire life was after that race.
Yeah.
But I was also physically exhausted because I did not do the right nutrition for that race. I didn't know enough. I don't think I ate enough at all. I was just too excited and too much going on to like pay attention that well to my nutrition, even though I set out this whole plan. So like mentally, I was in a fabulous spot. Physically, was a little bit struggle.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so you finished the race, and what what happened to your training after that? Like, were you like, okay, I want to keep doing this, I want to do more, how did that go about?
Oh, all of it. I had so much fun. I was like, okay, when can we do this next? When is the next race? Can I go further? That was a good distance, but I think I can master that pretty quickly. How do I level up? What's the next level? And how do I get there quickly?
Yeah, always on that climb, right? Always, what's next? What can I
Yep.
chase next? How long is a triathlon typically?
Yeah. So from that race, I started training for half-ironman. So the half-ironman distance is 1.2 mile swim, a 56-mile bike, and then a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles. So in total,
Right.
it's 70.3 miles.
Yeah, so it's really the biking and the running that they up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The swim isn't that much longer. It's 0.3 of a mile longer.
Yeah. And half half Ironman, I just want to be correct that it is literally half an Ironman. So
Mm-hmm.
the full Ironman would be 2.6, 112-mile bike, and then a full marathon.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
It's a long race.
Yeah. And when was your first half Ironman?
It was the following year. So it was Man Vineman, which is in the Sonoma region of California. So beautiful race through wine country. So that's
Nice.
where I get the name Vineman. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how did that race go?
Ooh, this race was very challenging for me. The swim went great, went off with a hitch. Everything kind of went perfectly. I started out pretty strong on the bike. I had really picked up my bike training from the last year. Really focused a lot of my training there and got much stronger on the bike. So I was feeling pretty confident. I had a kind of a major mishap at mile 46 on the bike. I stopped at an aid station, or I was about to stop at an aid station to grab a water. And the person who was in front of me, slightly in front of me, kind of cut me off to get to the aid station. So we ended up having like a minor, just a minor collision on the bike because we were slowing down. So, to grab the water, that they hold out with their arms. And so after the person, cut me off and we kind of collided, I hit the ground and a really sharp rock like cut my hip pretty deeply. So I had so much adrenaline and I didn't really know what was happening. So I got up and I looked at my clothes and I was like, oh, there's a rip and I'm kind of bleeding, but I think I'm okay. I was at mile 46. I had 10 more miles on the bike. And of course, luckily I was at an aid station. So, people were, giving me some wet washcloths and stuff, because apparently they saw I was bleeding more than I saw I was bleeding. Right. I was like, oh, I think I'm okay. I think I'm fine. So I get back up on my bike and I'm like, okay, it kind of hurts. It's like definitely stinging. And I get to the run transition. And then I like really look at myself. And it's a deep gash. It's a very deep gash. And my leg is kind of hurting. There's like blood in my shoe. And I'm thinking, should I stop and seek medical attention? This could potentially look like a stitches situation at this point.
Dang.
Yeah. But I didn't want to stop. I said, this is my first race. There's no way I'm not finishing. So luckily I had Advil in my little transition kit. And every mile on the half marathon, there's ice and a water station. So someone gave me some Band-Aids at one of the aid stations. So, tucked those in, put them on my hip, put my bike shorts back over my hip, and strapped on my running shoes. And every mile of the run, there was an aid station with ice and water. So I just kept shoving ice down, kind of like down my bike shorts in the spot that was bleeding. And it wasn't till probably like mile 8 or 9 where I started to feel like an ache, like down my leg, and started to think that, okay, this actually kind of hurts a lot. A lot. So I had to go inwards and keep pushing through. There was no way at this point that I was not going to finish this race. So just every mile, more ice. I think I was running and ice was falling out of my pants. I don't really know, what was happening. But so I ran with ice in my pants until the finish line, and I finished the race, and then I went to the medical tent. But
and did you end up getting stitches for it? What did they say?
No, but I definitely should have, because now I have a pretty decent scar there. But yes, they just told me I couldn't have done anything better just by putting ice in my pants and, kind of keeping compression and keeping compression on it. They told me I should probably go get it checked out, but I was a little bit stubborn at that point, and I was like, it looks okay now. It looks okay. And I kept thinking that, and it bled for like the next 4 or 5 days or so.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And has that given you any issues since, or is it just like a deep skin? Like, did you damage the muscle? Did you damage tendon or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So for a long time, for almost like the next year, I had kind of like a numb patch that went down my quad.
Dang.
Yeah. But it's fine now. But yep, it took a while. It was like kind of this numb patch that was almost down to my knee, and it eventually just kept creeping upwards. Like it kept creeping up my leg back to the spot where the cut was.
Yeah.
But I definitely did something in there,
and that was totally just sliced the nerve there.
Yep, 100%. And that was definitely exacerbated by me keeping on running and not stopping.
How did it feel to complete your first half Ironman?
Oh, I felt great. Again, I felt excellent. My mentality was, great. Despite my minor crash and all of that, I still ended with a pretty good time. I think that was my first one. I ended just over 6 hours, which is a decent time. I wouldn't say it's the best time, but I think it was 6 hours and 5 minutes or something like that. So not terrible for my first race and everything. And I was again so stoked, couldn't wait to do another one despite the challenges. But I was already planning in my head of ways to improve and ways I could do better. And I was excited to get back out there.
Yeah, so I mean, just to complete it, right? Like most people in, let's just say North America, the more than most, the vast majority of people in North America can't even like run a 5K, right? So for you to do a half marathon after doing 56 kilometers, I'm sorry, 56 miles of biking and a swim, like that's a huge accomplishment. That is really next level of fitness.
Yeah. Yep. And it is a wake up call when you get off the bike and you put on your running shoes, and it's different muscles.
Yeah.
You got to wake up some other ones, and, kind of get in gear.
Yeah.
But your legs feel it. You
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Can you like walk the next day, or are you kind of waddling around?
So well, my first one, I had kind of had the injury, so I was
Right.
definitely more of a waddle. But the as my training progressed, my recovery progressed also. So actually, I think I was probably the most sore after my first triathlon ever than I was sore after any
Wow.
Ironman event.
That's
Uh,
that's very interesting.
yeah, and I think it's just because the level and intensity of my training
Mhm.
continued to go up. So my recovery, my recovery, or my time to recover, I guess I should say, went down a lot. So when you're continuously riding, between, I would say, 50 and 70 miles every weekend, and then
Every
patching that
weekend.
on, yeah, every weekend. And
Wow.
then patching that on with, at least a 6 mile run after that, your recovery time and what your body gets used to becomes much more normalized.
Yeah. Is this like a part-time job for you in terms of like hourly commitment?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of time commitment. Um, I don't think you need to commit as much time if you don't want to. Uh, if you don't have any goals on placing, being on
Yeah.
podium, or if you're okay with feeling not so great for a
Right.
couple days
Yeah.
afterwards.
And
So
so
your training definitely is what you get out of it.
yeah, get what you give, right?
Yep.
Um, so you've now completed 3 half Ironmans.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the plan moving forward? Are you, because COVID, I imagine, has canceled these events. Um, what's your training like now? What are you planning for? Do you intend to do a full Ironman? Or are you sticking with half? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so I was actually going to train for another race this year. I haven't done one in 2 years. Just a couple, life things happened
Mm,
and whatnot. I also moved. I moved to Lake Tahoe, which is a couple hours from my old triathlon team.
right.
And different life events have happened, but I did want to do one again this year, and of course, then COVID happened, so all Ironman events were canceled
Yeah.
for this year. So, and I have no interest in doing a full Ironman.
Yeah.
Exactly like you said, even training for a half is so much time requirement, and I love being out on my bike almost every weekend, but I like it as more of my choice
Mm-hmm.
than I have to complete this very long distance in order to make this, a reality. So just a time commitment in training for a full Ironman. I just don't. There's other things I like to do with my time.
Yeah.
So I do think I will do another Ironman event for sure. Maybe
Hmm.
next year. We'll see what COVID has to
Yeah.
offer. But in this COVID climate, a lot of what triathlon has taught me is to really enjoy endurance events and how to challenge and push myself in different ways and different aspects, and use that training in other areas of my life. One that has really shown up this summer has been long distance backpacking. trips. I think especially with COVID and, not being able to travel anywhere too far, it's really brought me home and to do activities where, socially distanced, backpacking, and you're in the woods, you're in nature, you're not really around anyone. So a lot of my triathlon training really turned into endurance and overcoming mindset for distances I didn't think would be possible. I did a couple of backpacking trips recently where we had few mileage days that were we did 2 days that were marathon days. So hiking 26 miles
With
in a
all
day.
of your gear.
And so that one, the 2 marathon days were with day packs. The highest mileage day I did with a backpack though was 18 miles.
Dang.
Yeah. So we did a couple of trips that were like around 60 miles.
Yeah.
3 days.
Now
we were averaging about 20 miles a day.
How much does your pack weigh?
Ooh, so I tried to get mine between 34 and 37 pounds.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm
not a huge person, so.
How do you manage food when you're doing that? Because to get less than 40 pounds with all of your gear for sleeping, your clothing, etc., how do you also manage food in there?
Yeah, so I have the same breakfast almost every day. Just a packet of oatmeal, and some of the RX nut butter packages, and then a handful of nuts, seeds, and dried fruit, and mix it all together. And that's my breakfast. For dinner, I have a dehydrated meal. And then during the day, I just made like snack mixes, which were dried fruit and a variety of nuts,
Nice.
dried fruit and a variety of nuts, where I could just eat it throughout the day for like sustained energy.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to what I take when I go backpacking, what I eat. But I don't know, my packs always seem to weigh 1,000,000 pounds.
Yep.
So 60-mile backpacking trips. If for anyone who's listening to this, I want you to really think how far 60 miles is, and then imagine doing that through the woods with carrying everything that you're on, just to get a picture of what Amanda's actually doing here.
Yeah. So that was also just another super fun challenge and a way for me to push beyond my expectations, I guess, and what I thought I was physically able to accomplish. So before this backpacking trip, I had never carried my pack more than 10 or 11 miles, and only in, I would say, a couple day spurts, like 2 nights, maybe, or 2 or 3 night adventures where you'd go, hiking 9 to 11 miles, set up camp, hang out, and then come back, not through hike, not like point to point, through hike trails where you're actually covering a good amount of distance and you have to get to the end.
Yeah, there is no option to not get there.
Nope. Definitely not.
Nice. So it's this mindset of continual improvement, right? It's what else am I capable of? What else is there? What's next? Is that right?
Yes, for me, that is always top of mind. I really like challenging and pushing myself, both physically and mentally.
Yeah. And have you always been like that?
Kind of, I would say. When I was a lot younger, in grade school and in high school, I used to figure skate, and that was my kind of where I got my competitive edge, and where I learned some endurance, but not. It was more like fast endurance. But to challenge my body and to put myself into that kind of pushing competitive mindset, that's where I got that from.
Nice. So, Amanda, what your biggest, what was the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your training, throughout your endurance, throughout the pushing? What would you say the biggest lesson is?
You can do anything that you put your mind to. You really have to you really have to get yourself into a mental state to accomplish the physical. Your body will do it. You just have to have the mental fortitude to keep going and want to keep going. So you really need an internal drive and want or passion or whatever drives you internally. You really have to want it mentally to accomplish the physical. Without that, it's game over.
Yeah, it's all a mental game, right?
100%.
Is there any advice that you would share with someone who was struggling with a challenge in their own life? Because, as much as we can train endurance physically, it really does carry over into everything else that we do, right?
Oh,
Is there any
absolutely.
advice that you would give for someone who's struggling?
Envision what you want, and the steps will follow to get there. If you want it bad enough, if you want it bad enough, and set your mind to it, the right people, everything will start to fall into place, because that's going to be top of mind, kind of in everything that you do. So everything else will follow and come into place, but you really have to not lose track and not lose sight or hope of your end goal and really what you want. Because the second you move into the training or move into some of more of the minutia of how do I get there, I think that's where people get scared and start to kind of go hayward and not thinking that it's something that they can accomplish because the goal might seem so far away.
Yeah.
But if you focus on what you can do every day and what you can do that's in your control, and try not to, get too caught up in how you're going to get there. If you just do what's in your control every day and keep your eyes on the end goal, then it's possible.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So now my question is not for you, Amanda, but for our listeners. How are you going to apply these lessons into your life? What are you going to do with all of this information, and how are you going to use it to make yourself better tomorrow? If you'd like to reach Amanda, her email will be in the description of this podcast below. I would totally encourage you to even just congratulate her on all of her hard work. Congratulations, Amanda.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan.
If you found this podcast beneficial, please consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who can benefit from it as well. This podcast is brought to you by Sword Academy, where you can make the best you possible. You can find out more at sordacademy.ca. See you next week with another episode. Take care, Amanda.